Hello, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, Earthlings on planet Earth, wherever you are, whatever you're up to. Hope you're having a great day today. Today's video is quite unusual and maybe a little bit weird. And I have to choose my words very carefully. As you all know, this is an opinion piece channel, and it doesn't really matter what I think. I'm just a nobody. I'm on YouTube chatting shit. And I give my opinions as I'm feeling on the particular day. And with this particular video, it's going to be one of those videos where I might look back on it in a week's time and think, no, that's wrong, or I don't agree with that anymore, because quite often I watch my old videos and I think, oh, I don't agree with any of that, Fiona, so I've changed my mind all the time. But what's happened is I'm not one of those channels that says, according to sources, according to friends, allegedly, or I don't do any of that. I admire the channels that do and that do have sources and contacts, like Neil Sean, Lady C. I really admire that and the way that they go about it. But I have actually received information from let's put it this way, someone who has Harry's best interests at heart. It's not Harry himself, it's certainly not Meghan, it's nothing to do with Meghan. It's not a member of the royal family, but it is someone who has his interests at heart. And further than that, I can't really divulge. But what I can tell you is why Harry entered the court the other day by the front door. And I know there are lots of YouTubers, and I've read in lots of newspapers, theories and stuff, that it was for the opportunity of a paparazzi thing, and that he walked into a cameraman who some people think he knew. Maybe, I don't know about that part. But he did enter through the front quite deliberately. And he had a reason for it, which surprised me, actually. This is going to be a bit of a longer one because, as I say, he basically wanted to draw attention to this particular court case. Now, I hadn't heard anything about that there was going to be a hearing, and he didn't turn up because he knew that the king would have been in France, which we all know that tour was cancelled. And I knew that wouldn't be the case anyway, because that would involve the court themselves agreeing to a specific date in order for a PR thing, and they wouldn't ever. The courts will say this is going to be, such and such a hearing is going to be on such and such a date. Not even Prince Harry, Windsor, none of the Windsors, they can't, although they are the crown, they can't say to a judge, we want you to do a certain hearing on a certain date in order to provide a paparazzi shot. That doesn't happen. So the date will have been set long ago. He will have been aware of it, and so will all of the other claimants. And by the way, I had no idea that it was Stephen Lawrence's mother who was one of the claimants. I didn't know she was a baroness. I mean, I've been out the country so long now, guys. I've been out the country for about 13 years, yeah. And we're largely, down here, oblivious. We sort of live in a bit of a bubble all of our own here in Gibraltar and the surrounding area. In fact, we didn't even know Brexit was on the cards until David Cameron said, well, I think we're going to have a referendum. We were like, about what? What? And there was quite a lot of shock down this neck of the woods because we have our own local politics and stuff. So I didn't know that she was a baroness. I think she's been elected, or she was an MP or something. Is she in the House of Lords? I don't know. But she is one of the claimants. The other lady, I don't know who she is. Someone said she's something to do with Jude Law, and I never really followed Jude Law. And by the way, it was Kenyon. Actually, thank you, Kenyon, telling me that it was Stephen Lawrence's mum. I had no idea. Anyway, so what it appears to be is there's the phone hacking scandal, which I think everybody knows, even me. And there was the Levinson inquiry into what happened there. And I do vaguely remember seeing bits of that on the news. But again, it wasn't a story that I particularly followed at the time. And during that inquiry, certain things came to light. But a lot of those really pertinent things that came to light were protected from becoming public knowledge. I don't know what the term is. It's not protected, maybe privileged or whatever legal term they use. Basically denoticed. It's not going to be out there in the press. One of the things was the names of journalists, and the court has said they want to protect the names of the individuals, and I understand that because they're individuals. But apparently there was a lot of other information. Now, the Levinson inquiry was a long, long, long time ago, so I don't really know why the claimants have now decided, or when they started taking action on this quite a while ago. I think it might have been as far back as the South Africa tour, when Harry and Meghan announced there was going to be a lawsuit about her dad's letter, and of course that's the thing that took the big spotlight. But I seem to remember also Harry saying that he was going to relight the inquiry into the phone hacking. I could be wrong on that, but I seem to remember, and then that sort of fell away and nobody paid attention. So that could have been when he started bringing this action. And it does take a long time. Legal stuff goes on for years. Now, what he and the other claimants really want to do is to be allowed by law to tell the public those sections of the Levinson inquiry which have always been under wraps and legally bound, that are not allowed to be public. And it really all goes back to a case that I am familiar with, the murder of Daniel Morgan in 1987, which I know sounds a stretch, but I will put a link in the description to a sort of a documentary film that I watched called Murder in the Car Park. I watched it a few years ago. Someone brought it to my attention. It's 4 episodes, and each episode's, I think, over an hour long, but it is fascinating. And it all goes back to this guy called Daniel, who was murdered in a pub car park with an axe implanted in his head. And they've never solved his murder. But he ran a private detective agency, and it would appear that his business partner who ran the agency with him, there were always allegations what went on, who murdered Daniel and why, and that private detective agency apparently was embarking on work on behalf of, for example, News of the World and various newspapers, in order to not only spy, break in, but I seem to recall, Graham and I are rewatching it, but it's 4 hours long. I seem to recall that there was an allegation that they'd even broken into somebody's car, planted cocaine in it, and then called the police, and that person got arrested for it. Was someone high profile, I forget who. So many celebrities. Remember the story of the fake sheikh? Apparently this private detective agency was behind this. So I suppose the theory is that Daniel found out what was going on, didn't like it, and was going to grass them up and got an axe in the head. I think that's the implication, but I'll leave you to make your own mind up about it. So the phone hacking thing goes back a long way. And it's all about the influence that newspapers and the mainstream media have over all of us. And I think we're all in agreement there that a lot of us are of the opinion that mainstream media have their own agenda. So there's Windsor. He turns up at the court. He goes in the front entrance, and yet mainstream media is still going on about will they, won't they go to the coronation? Which, in comparison, who gives a crap about that? In comparison to what the real story is. Now, unfortunately for him, I suppose he thought, if we all turn up, and I'm going in through the front door because I know that I will attract the press. So the paps and the press were called. They were called. They knew he was going to go in through the front door. And he thought, well, then everybody's going to be looking at this and why we want this information from the Levinson inquiry made public. But unfortunately, mainstream media have continued with the will they, won't they, and worldwide privacy tour, South Park joke, which at the time I was exactly the same, up until receiving this information from this person who has Harry's best interests at heart. I thought the same. I thought, this is ridiculous. I mean, this is exactly your World Privacy Tour, isn't it, Windsor? But now knowing this, quite often there's an awful lot going on in the background. As we all know, we've always known that about the royal family. I suppose that's part of the fascination. But it's quite a serious issue that I've got to take my hat off to him for making a stand. Now, I disagree with him that, I mean, the irony of it is what he wants to achieve and the other claimants is that when newspapers or anybody says they have received information, that they then have to say who they received the information from and perhaps even how much that person was paid. So it's kind of ironic, I'm sitting here right now and I'm unable to tell you who my source of information is. And I know that person will watch this video and I hope they see the irony in it as well. So, and also if you're going to try and force through law where informants are named, that will deter whistleblowers on very important... Imagine I'm just making up a fake scenario. Imagine there's someone who works for a big pharmaceutical company who finds out that there's a drug that's been out on the open market that's killing people, you know, and they want to blow the whistle. There was a guy called David Shaler years ago, worked for MI5. He was a whistleblower, wasn't he? And he was on the run at the same time as me, actually. I found that quite amusing. So I think revealing sources will stop a lot of, you know, when you want to get something out for public interest. At the same time, I do understand that if you suspect that you have people close to you who are running to the newspapers and saying stuff, of course that's frustrating, but unfortunately that is the price of a free press and free speech. Now, to give you some example of how quite often things do not look the way they are. As you all know, I was on the run, I was a fugitive, I was Britain's most wanted woman, dubbed by the Daily Mail. I was never... Sussex Police never called me Britain's most wanted. I was never on a most wanted list. I was given the title by the Daily Mail. And this person has asked whether it's a possibility that the Daily Mail used a private detective agency similar to the one that Daniel Morgan owned before he was murdered. No, that wasn't the case. That wasn't the case. What happened was... in around about September 2001, Graham and I and little Faith, we were living on a campsite and both our mums came out to visit, and I took the mums and baby Faith to the supermarket, Supersol, and we were followed quite obviously by a car with 4 people in it, 2 women, a blonde woman driving, and they followed us all around the supermarket, and they were at their checkout at the same time we were at our checkout. And I saw the blonde woman on more than one occasion. And just before the mums flew back, there was a newspaper article. I can't remember if it was the Mirror, the Daily Mail, or what it was, but it was a headline that said, Britain's most wanted woman, the police haven't got a clue where she is. And I said to Graham, they know exactly where I am. And he said, well, what do you want to do? I said, well, let's just sit it out. I don't care. Let them come. Let's get it over and done with. If they're got their knickers in such a twist, let's get it over and done with. And that was the September 2001. Nothing happened. Nobody came. We had Christmas. Then there was a party on the campsite on New Year's Eve. And there was a Daily Mail reporter there. I don't know that for a fact, just sizing him up, looking at him. He stood in the corner of the bar, glaring at me the whole night. I was very conscious of his presence. I said to Graham, I don't want to drink. The owner of the bar had said, everybody has a tab, come and pay your tab in the morning, which Graham and I didn't like because we thought, oh God, you know, other people could be putting stuff on our tab. And he said, I promise I won't. I had 2 red wines, that was all. And I was absolutely floored. Someone must have put something in my drink. And I deeply suspect this journalist, and it was a journalist from the Daily Mail, just take my word for it, it was a great big tall guy. I can remember him now, suede jacket, dark trousers, glaring out. I think we've actually got him on video. We've been going through our home video. Anyway, so, I mean, I was absolutely paralytic. I had to be carried back to the caravan by Graham and a friend. And I said to Graham the next morning, my God, I only had 2 glasses of red wine. And he said, you must have had more. You must have done. It was an open bar. We've got a tab. Let's go and pay the tab. We went up to the bar and the bar owner said she only had 2 glasses of red wine. That's why we couldn't understand why she was so paralytic. And I said to Graham, that was definitely a journalist and they definitely spiked my drink. I know that. Anyway, again, nothing happened. And I believe it was the 24th of January. We were early in the morning and we had the curtains drawn before Graham was going to work, but there was just a crack and I saw this blonde woman walking down onto our pitch on the campsite. And I said to Graham, that's the police. They've come. And it was. And I came to know her as Noea, one of my arresting officers. And they had been following me from the September. And basically, the police had decided that it was a no-go, even though they'd had me under surveillance. And so I spoke to Steve Skerritt about this afterwards, and he confirmed it and said, yes, the police had said, we're not interested. She's not Britain's most wanted woman. And so the Daily Mail funded my arrest and orchestrated it. And that's a big bold thing for me to come out and say here on YouTube, but that was the case. They were there for the arrest. They had a photographer there. The person who signed my arrest warrant back in the UK, I did look into it and I did find some strange connections. So yeah, it wasn't a private detective agency. It was actually my best friend who gave away my location. My best friend of 11 years. So there's often an awful lot, but I mean, as far as the public were concerned, they just turned up. Steve Skerritt at one point tried lying to me, saying, no one knew where you were until that very morning. No one... Fuck off, Steve, fuck off. Then how come I was followed by Noea back in the September? How come newspapers were running headlines saying we haven't got a clue where she is? How come the guy was in the party? Anyway, all that is to come out at some point in the future, I suppose. So I do understand this person who has Harry's best interests at heart. I do understand how it can be with the Daily Mail, but I maintain that free speech is very, very important. In fact, one of the reasons that I think free speech is so important is, having been featured in the media on more than one occasion, I have often felt extremely frustrated in not having a right to reply or to get my story out, and provide evidence. And without free speech, I mean, let's say I could go on a TV show next week and maybe really rich and powerful people could say, we don't want Fiona having a YouTube channel because she might go yapping that we just told a load of lies in mainstream media. Do you see what I mean? Do you see what I mean? So free speech is very, very important. That's not to say that channel wouldn't go down anyway. This is a very complicated subject, and I'm guessing a lot of you are probably all scratching your head going, what the hell is she talking about? But it is an important one, and I will put a link to Murder in the Car Park, the first episode, and then if you want to watch that, then you can watch that. And then you begin to see the level of corruption that can happen. And I know what Harry, particularly, what his ultimate goal is from this court action. Whether he will succeed or not, I do not know. And I actually feel quite honoured to have received this information, and shocked. So I don't think the focus should really be on... I'm sure Meghan wants to be at the coronation and wants to be on the balcony and the kids and everything, but that really is just a sort of a sideline thing. That's not the big story that's going on here. And of course, a lot of mainstream media have their own reasons for not wanting to highlight why he went in through the front door of the court the other day. And I feel quite honoured to know the reason. I'm frustrated as well that I can't just tell you guys And what I would say to Windsor is, why did you waste your opportunities like the Oprah interview and Spare? And why didn't you just tackle the problem head on? Because every time you tell your story, it's watered down. Do you know what I mean? For what it's worth, I hope that most of you know what the hell I'm talking about. And I will end this by saying, what would you actually say to Harry in the comments here? What questions would you ask him? What advice would you give him? And I look forward to reading that. Thank you very much for listening.